Namaste and welcome, Yogi, to another episode of the Yinning at Life podcast. I'm your host, Kimberley Roberts of SolefulYin, and as usual, I'm here to dish out all things talking about traditional Chinese medicine meridian theory, Yin Yoga, of course, Acupressure, Reflexology, and you know what? I even dish out like some mindset hacks, tips, and things that you can do to just create what I call that Yinning at Life vibe. So welcome to today's episode. What do I want to talk about is something that people ask me a lot in my Yin Yoga classes that I teach. So if you don't know what Yin Yoga is, it's a little bit different style of yoga than other styles. So more active forms of yoga practice are, like you're moving around a lot, right? You're standing, you're sitting, you're lying down, you're twisting and stuff like that. There's a lot more dynamic movement. With Yin, it's a really passive practice, okay? It's done mostly on the floor, either seated or, you're laying on your back or on your belly or on your side. There's a couple of poses where you're standing in a somewhat of a forward fold, but to be honest with you, I don't teach any of those. So it's long held poses. Yeah. So you're using props and you're putting yourself into different yin yoga poses, into different positions, right? And then your body is holding still for like 2, 3, upwards of 5 minutes at a time, supported by any kind of props to hold the body in stillness, and you're breathing deeply. So this is essentially what Yin is about. Now, what my students ask me all the time is, why do I have to hold this pose for 5 minutes? Like, really? Like, why do I have to hold it for 5 minutes? Like, why? Like, why do I even have to hold it at all? I do other styles of yoga and I'm moving from this pose to that pose and that sort of thing. Why is it so different with Yin? Okay, well, I'm going to give you 2 reasons why it's different. So first of all, let's go from the Western approach, okay? North American approach. So Yin Yoga is all about stretching out, connective tissue and fascia that holds our body in place. It's kind of like the glue that holds everything together so your body doesn't fall apart. And so if you think of glue, I often say to my students, I want you to think of the connective tissue and fascia in your body is kind of like saltwater taffy. Like if you remember that, like I'm really dating myself here, but if you remember that, or you remember like some licorice, that type of thing, or silly putty is another one where you kind of had to like play with it in your hands a little bit to massage it and manipulate it so you could stretch it out. Well, it's the exact same thing with the connective tissue and fascia that holds your body together. It's stiff and it's tight by design, and that's to make sure that your body doesn't fall apart on itself. However, there needs to be a little bit of balance there between the tissues being soft enough that you can have flexibility and move with comfort, but also strong enough that you're not literally like a Gumby and you're falling apart, right? Because you're so flexible. So that's the main reason. What happens is when you hold the pose for a few minutes at a time, ideally at least 2.5 minutes, upwards to 5 minutes, what's happening is you're lengthening out that connective tissue and those fascial layers in your body from the long held stretch. So think of the silly putty as you're manipulating it and then you're stretching it out. Well, it's the same thing that's happening in a Yin Yoga pose. You're holding the pose, and with that hold, what's happening is it's allowing the lengthening of the connective tissue and the fascia to happen. Okay, so that's the Western approach of practicing Yin Yoga. Now, I teach a little bit from that perspective of like, okay, well, we're targeting hips today, or hamstrings, or low back, or chest, right? But for me, the big kicker in Yin is the more what I call the other side of Yin Yoga. So I call this, like, this is from the Asian or the Eastern approach of practicing Yin, which is very different. Their approach is not so much about the connective tissue and fascial layer stretching so that you gain flexibility, as they are more about bringing balance into your organs through this beautiful energetic system called meridians. Okay, now if I've just lost you right now, don't worry, I got you. Just hold on and listen, and I will explain. So remember when I said that all the connective tissue and fascial layers are in your body, right? They run throughout your whole body. Well, this energetic meridian system runs through the connective tissue and fascial layers in your body. Okay. I want you to think of them as like tiny little garden hoses that run throughout the connective tissue and the fascia. Okay. And just like a garden hose can have a kink in it and create like stagnation at that point, right? Either like you turn the tap on and the water just kind of trickles through the kink, or just like blatantly stops right there and it doesn't go anywhere. So what happens in this energetic meridian system is there are channels in this system that run through all your body. And this is where acupuncture works, right? Like if you've had acupuncture, you've had needles placed along a meridian channel in specific acupressure points for meridian points, right? So it's the same thing with yin. What happens is you get into a pose that targets a specific meridian. Let's just say the liver meridian channel, okay? Just as an example, right? All the organs have specific meridian channels associated with them. And so I want you to think like, so the liver meridian channel runs through the inside of your legs. So say you're in a wide-legged forward fold, or you're in tadpole, or people call it wide-knee child's pose in the Western approach. I always use all the traditional Eastern names for the yin poses because that's how I was taught. So in tadpole, for example, in this wide knee forward fold, right? You're targeting and stretching the inside of the legs where this liver meridian channel runs. And this channel runs up into your liver, the liver organ system, okay? So I want you to think of like the liver is kind of like the light, right? Like say a light fixture. So it's a light fixture. And then the electrical, like where you turn on the light, right? Think of that as like the beginning of the meridian channel where it starts. And so you click on the switch, and all of a sudden there's this current that runs through the switch, right? Up into the light fixture. And guess what? The light turns on automatically, right? So what's happening when you get into a yin yoga pose is that you start the pose, click, right? The activation is started. Now the energy is starting to move through the channel, through the connective tissue, up in through the whole meridian channel, where it runs throughout the whole body, depending on which channel it is. And then it also runs into the organ. So think of the organ as like the light fixture, right? So boom, you're sending this energy through this meridian channel into an organ. And what you're doing is you're creating or looking to create balance. So bringing the body back into balance, bringing the organ back into balance, right? In Chinese medicine, it's always about balance. It's always about bringing the body back into balance, okay? And so that's basically what you're doing. Now, what's even cooler than this, it's not just, and I shouldn't say just, but it's not just that you're helping to bring the organ back into balance. But in Chinese medicine, all of our organs have an associated emotion, okay? And let's just roll with the liver because we've been talking about that guy already. So the liver is the organ that holds anger, frustration, irritation, resentment, rage, right? So when you're holding this pose for a few minutes at a time, not only are you bringing back balance into the organ, but you're also helping to release any stagnant, trapped, or stored emotion that's inside that organ. Now, if you've ever done any kind of like work on your emotions, you know that it's a process, right? Like the emotion comes up, you feel the discomfort associated with it, right? Whatever it is, whether it's sadness, grief, anger, worry, fear. And one of two things happens when these emotions come up that we consider to be unpleasant, right? mean, in Chinese medicine, no emotion is bad or good. They're just indicators of where you're at. So they don't label them in a certain way. They don't label fear as like a bad thing, right? We are meant to experience a broad spectrum of emotions in our life. We can't be happy 24/7, 365, right? Like it's just not humanly possible. So, what happens when an emotion comes up that makes us feel uncomfortable? One of two things happens. We either acknowledge it and go, okay, yeah, anger is coming up. Let me process this. Let me go through it. Let me figure out why I'm angry, as an example, and then let me release it. Or the other thing that often happens is we suppress it and we shove it back down. So it's kind of like, think of your organ like a suitcase, right? So you've got a bunch of stuff in the suitcase and it's full. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, so now I want to take some stuff out. So you start to take some stuff out and things feel a little bit lighter as you're moving things around. But then you're like, oh, I don't know. Like, I don't think I can do this. I think the suitcase would be better if it had more stuff in it. So then you shove the stuff back into the suitcase and then all of a sudden things get really uncomfortable, right? Because now it's like overstuffed. So it's the same thing with us as humans is when we experience an emotion that we're not comfortable with, we either acknowledge, process, and release, or we suppress it and shove it back down. And this happens in yin yoga poses. Why you want to hold for 5 minutes is to allow the body to process and release. That process and release doesn't happen in 30 seconds. The connective tissue stimulation and the energetic movement of energy through the meridian channel doesn't even happen in less than 2 minutes. It needs a minimum of 2 minutes for it to be effectively stimulated and activated. So you need the long hold for a couple of reasons. You need it so that your body can gain the flexibility, but you also need it to release the emotions too. And if you've ever done work around emotions, you know that sometimes things can come up real quick and we can acknowledge it and we can process and release. But sometimes we need a little bit more time, right? We need a little more time to contemplate, to investigate, to inquire, to feel. And sometimes that happens in 5 minutes, but sometimes it doesn't happen in 5 minutes. Sometimes we need more time and more practice, right? So these are the reasons why we hold in yin. Now, depending on who you practice with as a teacher, some teachers who teach yin teach it only from the Western approach. So it's just about the physical stretch in the body and gaining flexibility. That's okay. That's all right. Perfect. Then there are other teachers like myself who teach mostly from the Eastern approach, from the emotion to organ support. This is really my jam. This is what I love to teach about, is all about the meridian system in the body and how we can bring it back into balance through yin yoga poses and the practice of yin. Now, sometimes, like I said before, I do teach it from the from the Western approach, because sometimes some people want to know both. They're like, okay, I know we're working our hips. Great. I'm going to get more flexibility in my hips, but I kind of want to know what else is going on here. Right. And it's like, oh, well, the hips include the area primarily of the gallbladder meridian channel that runs on the outside of the legs, the liver, spleen, and kidney meridian channels that run on the inside of the legs, the stomach meridian channel that runs on the top of the thighs. Right. So sometimes we want to know that extra layer of information because we're inquisitive creatures by nature, right? And we want to learn. And if you're someone that's looking to cultivate a lot of emotional intelligence, this is a beautiful way to do that, and in a safe way as well, where you're supported and you're being guided by a teacher who understands what it's like to acknowledge, process, and release emotions. I mean, this is why I practice yin, From the very first Yin Yoga class that I did, which I didn't even know was a Yin class. But when I started to realize that I wasn't in the right class, I was in Yin when I thought I was going to be in Ashtanga class, which is a completely different thing. It's not even like apples to oranges. It's like apples to onions. But I started to realize in this class, I was like, wait a minute, like there's something really cool happening here. Like, sure, I'm feeling a stretch right now. The teacher's saying we're stretching out our low back. Sure, okay, I'm feeling that. But I'm like, there's something else that I'm feeling. Like there's stuff that's brewing. I'm feeling emotions come up. And it was like, I was curious because I was like, I want to know like what happened aside from me just getting bendy and stretched out. And when I started to realize that we had this beautiful meridian system in our body and that we could activate it through yin poses and help to not just create organ health, but also emotional stability and resilience and awareness even, I was like, well, damn, like I'm certainly like up for that. Absolutely. Because let's face it, we're human beings living in a human experience in this thing called life. And we're going to feel, we're going to have emotions. You're not a robot. You're not going to go through your life never feeling an emotion. And sometimes those emotions are going to want to stick around and linger. And I don't know why that just came up. But anyways, whatever. I guess maybe the software Zoom likes that. So, like sometimes the emotions are going to come up and they're going to linger, and we're going to want time to investigate. We're going to want time to dive into it. We're going to want to know why is this emotion coming up? And we can use this beautiful practice to help us release these emotions in a safe way. This is another reason why when I teach Yin, I say it's not about how you look, it's about how you feel. And I don't care how propped up you are, how many blankets or bolsters or blocks you got to use in a pose. I don't care about that. I don't care what you look like in the pose. I don't care how deep of a stretch you're getting. I know that if I'm going to have you hold a pose for 5 minutes, there's going to be more that's being activated and stimulated than just a physical stretch in your body. I know that there's going to be emotional and mental components to the practice. Now, whether you choose to acknowledge that or not is completely up to you. But I'm here as a teacher to guide you into a safe place where you feel like you can release and feel like it's okay to do that. Because again, a lot of us were taught and brought up that, you know what, certain emotions, especially anger is one where we just don't acknowledge it. We don't process it. We just shove it back down. But that's like, when you shove your emotions back down into your body, it's kind of like you keep sweeping the dust under the carpet, or you keep shoving more clothes into the suitcase, right? And hoping that it's just going to stay closed. But eventually what happens is the suitcase just explodes, or you step on the carpet and all of a sudden, like, boom, like the dust is everywhere, right? So your body is not meant to hold on emotions indefinitely. That's why we call them emotions. It's energy in motion, right? It's emotions in motion, in movement, in flow, right? We're meant to feel them, but then we're meant to let them go. And as I said before, emotions are simply an indicator of where you are at in the moment. So if you're angry, you're angry. Don't label it as bad. If you're scared, you're scared. Don't label that as bad. If you're happy, don't label that as good. It's just, okay, I'm happy right now. Great. Beautiful. I'm angry right now. Okay. All right. Do I really want to be angry? Not particularly. Well, then why am I angry? Like, why? Why is this emotion here? What is present? What is happening in my life right now that is causing me to feel this way? And this is where you can use the practice of yin along with breath work, even along with acupressure and reflexology, which is all what I teach on my SolefulYin app, is all about using these blended modalities to help you acknowledge, process, and release your emotions and feel better. And to feel better, not just in your physical body, but to feel better in your mental and emotional and energetic body as well, because it's all just one connected vessel, right? And so this practice really is more than just a physical stretch. And I'll say that over and over again, and my students know it who practice with me, is that I say yin is so much more than just a physical stretch. It really is a powerful tool to help you come into balance physically, mentally, emotionally, and energetically, and to live what I say is your yinning at life vibe. So your best life, right? So that is why we hold for 5 minutes. So cool, isn't it? I think it's cool. Anyways, so that's all that I got to riff on today. For those of you that are interested in practicing with me, you can certainly hop on board on my app. I will put the show note link in for you and you can check it out. And thank you so much for pressing play on today's episode. And I will see you the next one. Namaste.